Good evening, Brunswick. I would like to call this second meeting of the year on this date, January 19th, 2022, to order. We will now open up with an invocation, and I will kick us off in that. So if we can all bow our heads. Father God, we thank you for this time that we have before you. Thank you for this time that we get to come together, all the citizens of this city, to do what we can, that little bit that we can to make our city better and stronger and work better for each other. We ask that you watch over us, watch over all of the commissioners, watch over all of the citizens of this great city as we go to work for each other. In your son, Jesus' name, we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
We will now go to the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Martin, if you don't mind, would you mind kicking us off from there with the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. We will now move on to our agenda items, and our first agenda item is consideration for approval of an alcohol and beverage license, and we'll now turn it over to Mrs. Monday.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight I do have a new alcohol license request. Del Sur Cafe is located at 2700 Parkwood Drive. Owners Alberto Lamo and Hernan Stetzer are present here tonight. A review has been completed on both of them, and there is nothing negative that would prevent an alcohol license. However, there is a small apartment complex with small apartments, 5 of them right behind the restaurant. But we do have the permission or a written statement from the owners that doesn't mind that they have no objection to the restaurant selling alcohol. They are requesting a license for an on-premise of consumption of beer and wine, and with Sunday sales. And I present this for consideration of approval.
We thank you so much, Mrs. Monday. We'll now open the floor to public comment for in favor of or against. Hearing and seeing none, I will now open it to the council for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the license for Del Sur Cafe on Parkwood Drive.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, I will now open the floor. So all those in favor show by the sign of aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. We'll now move on to number 2, and all of these are appointments. They are appointments that we are working on steadily. We have had interviews for several of them and still taking in applications on a couple of them. We know how important it is for these to be filled. So what we can say is for sure, by the next meeting, all 4 of these will be ready to be voted on, but there is some continual vetting that we need to do from the mayor's office. So I would prefer to defer these until the next meeting, and I will open that up for a motion.
I'll make a motion to defer all 4 appointment items.
I appreciate you, Commissioner. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Ayers. And now we will open it up. All those in favor show by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you so much. Now we will move on to further items of consideration. Number 3, consideration of approval of January 5th, 2022 regular scheduled meeting minutes. Ms. Atkinson.
Yes, Mayor, the minutes has been submitted and are in your folders, and they're up for approval with any necessary changes or deletion or addition.
We appreciate you, Ms. Atkinson. Are there any questions that we have from Ms. Atkinson to the commission? Hearing none, I will open a motion to approve the minutes. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve minutes as presented.
I appreciate you, Commissioner. Do I hear a second? Hearing a second. All those approved show by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, the ayes have it. We will now consider the approval of financial reports as of November 30th, 2021. Ms. Mills?
Kathy, you're muted. Let's see.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, I was talking away. Okay, you have before you the financial report as of November 30th, 2021, and at that point, we are 42% roughly into the current fiscal year. For the month of November, we had net revenues over expenditures of approximately $83,000. Year to date, we are revenues over expenditures of approximately $4.7 million. We have a cash balance of $8,944,000, which is held at Prime South. 300,000 of that is money that is basically set aside from the sale of the Perry Park property, which we intend to invest in additional property. The money is at Prime South. Prime South is paying 0.875%. You'll remember we had a lot of money at Georgia Fund 1. Most all of that has been moved. Georgia Fund 1 is still paying 0.05%. So we are earning a lot more at Prime South than we were at Georgia Fund 1. You'll see the loss numbers. If you compare November of this year to November of the prior year, it was up 17.62%, which equated to $103,000 additional revenue. Year to date, we are up 11.16% for a total of $358,000 more from the current period last year. Title ad valorem tax, we were down 11.61% for the month of November, which equated to about $3,500. Year to date, though, we are up 2.99% of a total of approximately $4,700. On page 2, you have your SPLOST 6. And I'll just go briefly since we have some new faces. The first column there tells the total amount we've expended as of November 30th, which is a little over $15 million. But we also received reimbursements. A good bit of it was from DOT and from joint projects with JWSC. You can see at the bottom with little asterisks where I've listed, money that came in, which totals what's in that reimbursements received. So out of our SPLOST 6 proceeds, the city has actually expended as of 11/30 approximately $12 million. Our original budgeted amount we expected to receive from SPLOST 6 was $13,832,000. But as you can see, we have received more. If you look down, we have cash on hand in the middle of the page, a little over $4 million. And we have some unallocated money. If you look at the very bottom, the original amount we had allocated or expected to collect was 13 million. And we actually collected over 15 million, which was an excess of $1,887,000. We paid back some money to the general fund that we had funded some equipment with and some overages with. We allocated some to stormwater improvements and an additional 50,000 to sidewalk replacement. So if you go back to the number under total cash on hand, we have approximately $450,000 in SPLOST 6 that has not been allocated to any particular project at this point. A part of that was the overaging collections of approximately $200,000. We have some Georgia DCA aviation fuel tax, $16,000, and the interest that's been earned in SPLOST 6 was $233,000 approximately. On the next page, you have SPLOST 5. We have a cash balance as of November 30th of $1,357,000. That money is on the table to be allocated to a new fire truck, and I've listed that. We had $1,204,000 of that $1,357,000 was from money that was not spent on Oglethorpe, and the remainder was interest that was earned in SPOS 5. Norwood Street Commons Fund, we have not paid out any expenditures year to date. You can see the total since that fund was started back in May of 2013 over in the far right column, and the expenditures for it. So right now we earned interest year to date of $549,000. There is a cash balance in that fund of $336,000. On the Roosevelt Harris Multipurpose Center Fund, we have total inflows of $159,000. 90,000 came from grants, and the other major contributor is what the city funds for the Roosevelt Harris Center, which at this point we have spent $40,000 that have come from the general fund. We have budgeted for the year $151,000. So at this point of November 30th, that was approximately 26% of what we had funded, and we're at 40-something%, through for the year to date. So we're well under what we had anticipated. Expenditures year to date, $144,000. And so there is a cash balance of $27,673 in Roosevelt Harris. That money normally stays, close. We never carry a lot of funds in that because we're allocating money from the general fund. And so we just move it as we need it. The next page is the sanitation fund. Total revenues year to date, $1,487,000. Expenditures, $715,000 for an operating income of $772,000. But I do want to point out, particularly for those not familiar, that we have already received most of our money for the sanitation fund because it came in when we billed on property taxes. So the majority of the funds have come in. We do still have a few customers that pay monthly, and our commercial property pays monthly. So we have a cash balance of $713,000 in the sanitation fund, and there's an additional amount of $194,000 that we have restricted for making payments on the T Street landfill that we were required to clean up. So that money is set aside for that. And hopefully that project will be winding down soon, and we will have some of those funds left. Sanitation billing, trash pickup runs around $129,000 a month. And you'll see our year-to-date total there of $638,000. Then we pay for illegal refuse cleanup and for street sweeping. On the stormwater utility fund, it's much like the sanitation fund. We have received most of the funding on that already at this point this year through the billing on the property taxes. So at this point, we're showing a net of $404,000 revenues over expenditures. We have a cash balance in that fund of $666,000. There was no funds spent during the month of September. Or sorry, that should be November. Anyway, there's no money spent in the month of November for animal control, traffic control, or recreation department expenses that we would have paid for, Glenn County. The last page is the Roosevelt Lawrence Center. And you'll see we have total expenditures for the month of $7,000, which is in line with what we've paid year to date. I'm sorry, these were the salaries and wages, year to date of $42,000. We'll see the grand total at the bottom, expenses for the month, $7,250, total year to date, $54,000. There were a couple of expenses that did not get paid until January, but there was nothing outside of the ordinary, no significant expenses. I think the electric bill got paid at the very beginning of January the beginning of December instead of the end of November, because we were in the process of moving over to ADP with the payroll, and that's my same person. So we were a little bit behind on that. So that's the financials as of November. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to entertain those. And if I can't give you the answer tonight, I will certainly look it up and find out what you need.
I appreciate you, Ms. Mills. I want to open it up to any questions from the commission. Hearing none, we will now entertain a motion to approve the financial reports as of November 30th. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second. All those in favor of approval of financial reports as November 30th, 2021, please say aye.
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 All those against, please say nay. Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you so much.
Mayor, if I can interject,
Yes.
this is very challenging since you're not here, but I wanted to back up just enough to let everyone know that the applicants for the Del Sur service for on premises consumption of alcohol, they were here, and we were remiss in welcoming them and thanking them for opening up a business here in our community. And then the other person that was here that y'all might not have been aware of was Brad Piazza was here, who is an applicant for filling one of the positions on the Downtown Development Authority Board. So I just wanted to call that to everyone's attention since it's difficult since everybody's not here. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Commissioner Martin, I appreciate that. Unfortunately, I cannot be there tonight, but I appreciate those who are with us in person. It means a great deal to the entirety of the commission and the city. And I do want to echo those sentiments of bringing a business into our city. Del Sur, we're looking forward to being patrons and working with you. So we thank you for that. Thank you for that, Commissioner Martin. We will now move on to the consideration of approval of the reallocation of the substantial amendment for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act funds. This is something where I would like to remove this and move it back into the Finance Committee. I think with having two new commissioners on the commission, it would do us well to have a little more information on these projects and to also fully understand the scope and the grasp of the use of these funds. So I would like to entertain a motion that we move this item back, these allocations back to the Finance Committee. And at this point, I will entertain a motion to do so.
I'll make a motion to defer.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Harris. With that, all those in favor, please show by the usual sign of aye.
Before we take a vote, can I just ask one discussion question? Is there a time, is this time sensitive at all to have a vote and a decision?
Well, we have gone through part of the process in terms of advertising for the amendment, but it will slow it down. But certainly we want to make sure the commission is fully abreast. So I don't think it's going to deter anything.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for that question.
Can we do a referral date specific?
Your
So
question-
Are you amending the motion then?
I didn't make it.
Date
Commissioner
specific?
Commissioner Kaysen did. Because we do want to be cognizant of timeframes and time constraints. So if we can be specific in our bringing this matter.
When does the Finance Committee meet again? And we'll do it, the meeting after the Finance Committee meets. How does that sound?
At work, I believe the finance meeting meets on the 24th. That's Monday, the 24th. And the next meeting will be February 2nd.
So the motion will be to bring this back for the February the 2nd meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Ms. Atkinson, that is really, we have been holding that on the last Monday of the month, which I thought was.
Okay. So it's going to be on the 31st?
Yes.
Yeah, that's when it's scheduled.
Okay, then it won't make the second meeting then. Can y'all do it next week, Monday, the 24th instead of the 31st?
Well,
I can, as long as I can get,
Still do that.
out of town.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
we
don't
can-
understand why the 31st wouldn't work. Am I confused as to why that?
The 31st, it will be on the agenda. We'll put it on the agenda since all the information has been publicized. And that meeting on the 31st should suffice because the commission meeting is not until the 2nd.
Perfect. So if we can keep that timed as usual on the 31st and still be able to hear it on the meeting on the 2nd, I'm happy with Commissioner Kaysen's original motion to put this to a vote on the next meeting, hear it in finance, and then be able to hear it at the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Hearing a first, Commissioner Harris, you still seconding that motion?
Yes.
Wonderful. Any other questions before we take a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor of putting this back to finance to be voted on in the next meeting, the first meeting of February, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. We will now.
Can I add one small thing? And I have had a conversation with our city manager on this as to whether or not the criteria for the Golden Isles Veteran Village is primarily for Glenn County vets as far as being eligible for a tiny house in that community. So if that information could be provided.
Yes, we will contact them and find out more information about the criteria that they'll use for the applicants.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's all.
Appreciate that. No, any other questions before we move on? Hearing none, we will move on to item 6, the consideration of approval to purchase a fire truck, and we will hear from Chief Marble.
Good evening, and thanks for having me. First of all, I would like to thank Miss McDuffie. I'm wearing a 40-year pin I got in the mail from Miss McDuffie the other day. That's a mark that firemen kind of strive for, is that 40-year mark, and very few get to make it. And I'm just proud and honored to be able to wear a 40-year pin. And I guess that's one of the big things for me.
Congratulations.
Moving on to the purchase of the fire truck. We did solicit bids for the aerial platform or ladder tower. The bid came back at $1,583,000, $583,429. $1,442,629 for the purchase of the aerial, and $140,800 for the purchase of equipment to outfit the truck. Let's see, 1.3 million had previously been allocated from the conference center project, and the remaining funds will come out of the 2023 budget. We'll have let's see, the total is $1,583,429 with so $1,204,051 is coming from SPLOST 5. And then $153,378 is coming from interest from SPLOST 5. And from the general fund, we'll have need $226,000. And we would like to get approval to do that. We recommend that we go with the bid of $1,583,429.
Chief Marble, if you wouldn't mind, number one, I want to say, I want to echo the sentiments of the commission, and thank you for your service, 40 years to our community. It is truly a blessing to have you. If you don't mind, if I could just ask a quick question, as we look into and think about this purchase of a new fire truck, can you help not only the commission understand, but also those in the community, the need for this purchase and what it's going to truly in the community?
Yes, be glad to. Since we bought our last ladder truck and it's approaching its 20-year mark, the hospital was added on to, and the height was increased, all that front part of the hospital where you go in the revolving door. And that was our main concern as far as that building. The ladder truck that we have just doesn't reach that building. We've also got some apartments coming, and but this truck is a whole lot safer. It's a bucket. The one we have now, you have to climb it, and I don't know if you've ever climbed 75 foot. It's about 8 stories in full turnout gear up a little tiny ladder sticking up in the air. It's not fun. And once you get to the top, you can't move. You're stuck right there. With a bucket, this one, it's 100 foot, so it'll reach everything we have. And you ride up to the top. It's designed to rescue people and fight fire. And once you get at the top, you can move around from a joystick in the bucket. You can also control it from the ground, but once you're at the top, you can still move it around. So you can't. It's just a lot better truck than what we have, but it'll reach the taller buildings that we have now and that we have coming. And we got to replace the one we have now because at 20-year mark, it's getting, we worry about the safety side of it. But and that's pretty well it in a nutshell. And I want to take Miss McDuffie up 100 foot in the air in that thing too. That's
What's the projected length of service that we could expect from this vehicle?
They're designed to last 20 years. Of course, we try to make them last longer, and we will ours. We're not trading it in. We're going to keep using it as a reserve, and it'll still going to run calls. Ours isn't a real ladder tower truck. Ours is what we call a Quinn. It's just a combination pumper ladder truck. This will be the one we're getting. It'll be a true aerial platform, a true ladder tower. And so about 20 years is the norm to take them out of service. But if it's like we've always done, we'll keep it and use it longer than that, hopefully.
And will it fit in the bay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I figured y'all had made those measurements. Why do you think we only received one bid?
I only talked to one manufacturer. He called, and he said they couldn't meet the specs. And right now they're putting out these trucks as fast as it's going to take 18 months to get this one built. There is a price increase. We need to rush on it because we have kind of got to the last end of the wire here. But January 31st, the Pierce manufacturer called me today and said there'll be right at $100,000 price increase on that truck, January 31st. Every year they have pretty good price increases, and this year is a pretty massive one. I think everything's going up. But
do you have any idea what the criteria was that most of the other manufacturers were not able to bid on? What?
Not really. He just said he couldn't meet the specs. I really don't know. I don't know if it was the thickness of the aluminum for the body that we require. I don't know if it was stability and the weight limits on the ladder we require. But I just don't know. He just to bid on a fire truck, a lot of engineers get involved, and so it doesn't cost much to bid on a normal pumper. But when you're bidding on a ladder tower, then they're looking at spending $6,000-$7,000 just to be able to bid on that truck.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, can I make a point of clarification on the funding for this? It is from the allocation that was originally from the SPLOST 5, but just to make sure that these funds had been put back as general funds. And if we were not to use this for the fire truck, we would have to raise taxes to pay for the fire truck. So that's the reason that we're allocating those particular funds for this purpose. Thank you.
It's a good comment.
Appreciate it.
Randy, where is this truck going to be manufactured?
Wisconsin, Appleton, Wisconsin. Yes, sir. I think at Appleton, Wisconsin.
I don't understand the single sourcing of a $1.5 million fire truck. I need some help.
You're talking about a single source manufacturer. We require one manufacturer build the entire truck. Is that-
I'm saying, why didn't you put this out to bid?
We did. But we didn't receive but one bid, and I talked to one of the E1 salespeople, Fireline, that we've bought our pumpers we bought our last ladder truck from them and the last 3 pumpers from them. And, but he said they couldn't meet the specs.
Was
I
it a written bid?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was a sealed bid. What we're asking is because we only got one bid, and it doesn't say sole source, it says the sole bidder. We went through all of the proper advertising and it was done by sealed bid.
Mhm.
Good. I think that what would help with that, particularly with folks being new, is that you include the bid. Give that information with with what we're asking here tonight, so people know that you did put out a bid. That was one of the first things I noticed, and Randy, you know, that's exactly the thing I look for is competition.
And let me comment right here. I was trying not to say too much. But I did relay that very information, Commissioner Kaysen, because I've been with you long enough to know what you're gonna ask.
Thank you.
And I specifically addressed that in the Finance Committee meeting, that all of this information be provided. I also asked regarding the warranty and no specifics. And so I did see that some information was provided. And I would like them to also address that information as well. But I did ask those specific questions because I know what my counterpart that sits to my left is going to ask. And so I did cover those things in the Finance Committee.
Good. Well,
And-
I'm looking for it without a doubt. Thank you.
Please remind you and inform the mayor and the new commissioner that this did come before the commission and we requested to go out for RFP for this purchase prior to even advertising and sending it out. So the process was for us to ask if we can go out for bid for this, and it was approved by the commission. And then we sent out the bids, had the advertisement done. We did not receive but one bid, and that was basically, I guess, the question that came up. But generally, we would provide bid information if we had several bidders. So that was one of the reasons why we requested it to be approved, because we would have come back for the approval anyway, but the way we worded it to say the sole bidder.
And they did.
Oh, that's good.
cover
No,
that.
excuse me, Felicia, go ahead.
No, I was just saying they did cover that because I knew that would be a question that you would have on Commissioner Kaysen.
Yeah.
And so I did cover that with the chief, with
Well,
Kathy, as well as with
thank
Regina.
you. The nomenclature is certainly right. There's no question. You've got a sole bid. And to put the bids in here, the bid tabulation sheet, show those people that bid, and perhaps even for our new folks, put the equipment specification sheets in here. We've done that in the past, and it probably would be a good thing and a bit of help for these folks coming on. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me.
Appreciate that. Is there any other questions? Any other comments?
I'm going to ask a general question in this situation, not necessarily specific to this situation. But when we put something out for bid and when we only get one bid back, and if it's because there were certain criteria that couldn't be met, or, you know, sometimes you ask for a bell or a whistle that you know, some can't produce. So I guess my question is, does it make sense to go back and say, what part of what was being asked for could you not produce?
One of the biggest things that the other manufacturers could not produce was the overall length of the truck.
Okay,
I think there was around a 12-foot difference in the length of the truck. And I know y'all aren't real familiar with things like tail swing and stuff like that on fire trucks, but Pierce had the shortest truck. The E1 truck would have fit in our bay, would have had about 6 inches in front of the truck and 6 inches in the back of the truck. So we would have eventually took out that back wall, backing it in, I'm sure. But the biggest thing is in the turning radius and the length of the truck, the between the back 2 tires on it and the rear of the truck. On the E1, I can't remember off the top of my head the distance there. I want to think it was like 20 foot, and the Pierce truck is only 10 foot. So if you're going down Norwich Street and you're turning right on L Street off of Norwich Street, if there's a car in that left turning lane, the rear end of that truck's going to swing around and take that car out. You can ask Glenn County about that. They're pretty familiar with it.
well,
And
that's great information to know.
so
I mean-
that some of those things, we required it to be a certain, we didn't know that E1 and some of them, it's hard to meet those specs, but we safety is our priority. And remember, our high turnover rate, we have a lot of new drivers, and they're going to be driving a truck a lot bigger than they're used to driving. And we want to be real careful and safe on that part and that aspect of it. The other thing is it's in town, in the city of Brunswick, on our narrow streets. And this truck we required a pretty sharp turning radius. We didn't know who could meet it and who couldn't. We kind of assumed everybody could, but some of them, only one manufacturer could meet that sharp turning radius. And to get around in the city of Brunswick, you got to be able to turn that thing. You can't be pulling forward and backing up, pulling forward and backing up. We have pretty hard time with just regular pumpers in parts of town.
So really the criteria is non-discretionary. I mean, it's that they had to meet those specs.
Well,
Yes, ma'am.
there are certain specs that they have to meet, which the chief is alluding to. But in some regards, there are things that we ask for equivalence. And basically, you know, if there's some quality or a standard, or they can meet it or have an equivalent standard. And that kind of lends itself to, you know, even if we spec it to a certain brand, if they can meet that by having some equivalence, then that is acceptable as well. But certain things, I mean, the turn radius, that's not, you know, I think that's something that would be very specific.
Yeah.
And the length of the truck.
Yeah.
And the only reason Pierce met that, one of the reasons is they just recently came out with a 5-section ladder. That long ladder that determines how long the truck's going to be. And so instead of a 4-section like everybody else has, they came out with a 5-section ladder. And they found a way to make it just as sturdy as a 4-section ladder. And nobody else has been able to do that yet that I know of. And I think that was a big part of the reason they could shorten that truck. Glenn County has a Pierce almost exactly like it. There's no bells and whistles hardly on this truck. It's just a flat truck. But this one will be a little shorter, same manufacturer, but they came out with a shorter, about a 15-foot shorter truck, I think is what it was. I can't remember, but it's a good bit shorter. And so that's going to help us a lot with the safety and the maneuverability and to be able to fit it in our station. This one will have several feet in the front and several feet in the back of it when it's parked in our bay.
That was very helpful information. So
And it would
thank you.
all be good to have it documented, everything that we have just brought out here to support having a sole bidder for $1.5 million. So
Yep.
some
We don't like it
verbiage
when we
added
only
to
have that.
this. Pardon me?
We don't like it either when we only have a sole bidder because
No, I know you don't. I know that, but all we need is documentation here of what we've just brought out added to this, so we'll know. And Now, let me ask you this. I remember going through this years ago. Are we going to have trips to Wisconsin to take a look at the building of this piece of equipment?
When we send out the bids on the truck, there is a couple trips to Wisconsin. There's a pre-build trip. And that's where we make sure everything is going like we plan. For the manufacturer, that's a trip that they can try to get you to add on stuff and cost more money. But I've been through this one several since 1990, every truck we spec. And, but yes, there's also that this manufacturer is also there'll be engineers coming to train us. This truck's going to require a whole lot of extensive training. And, so that's also part of it too.
Who will pay for the trips?
Pierce it's in the bid. It's Pierce.
Did everybody else see this? Did the other bidders see that you had inspection trips in here?
Yes, that was in the specs when we sent it out.
And how many people are going to be required to make the inspection?
2 people usually go, and that's how many that we put in the specs, the bid thing. And so I believe there's 2 trips for 2 people, but it won't cost the city of Brunswick anything.
Oh, it will too. It will cost. There's a cost, Randy.
Well, outside of this,
There's a cost. If the manufacturer is not going to absorb it.
well, yes. Anything in addition to what this price is for the truck.
Again, I want to ask one last time, do we have any additional comments or questions for Chief?
The only comment I would like to make is if this is approved and once we take delivery, that we have a community unveiling, much like we did for the last big piece of equipment. I thought that was a good move to let the public come see what we have in the way of fire safety that brings us to the level that we need to be.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that robust discussion. And now we will entertain a motion to approve the purchase of our fire truck. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the purchase of the fire truck as presented.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second. All those in favor show by the usual sign of aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Moving on to our last item of the night, under city attorney's items, the consideration and adoption of ordinance number 1074, a short-term rental ordinance. And with that, I would like to send it over to Commissioner Martin.
Yeah, I would just like to say that unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at this, the consideration and discussion for the short-term rental ordinance has bridged between 2 different commissions. And so Mayor and Commissioner Roll have not really had an opportunity to wade through the full ordinance and, had the ability to ask questions of staff. So I would like to continue maybe discussion tonight. I think that would be a good opportunity for all of us to hear thoughts that we have on this. I think it's important to mirror what the county has, but I would like to defer any vote that might be taken until the first meeting in February. But again, I'd like to have discussion open tonight as far as what our city attorney might want to present.
No, I fully appreciate that, Commissioner Martin. And so I will take that as a motion to ensure that we have debate tonight and have full discussion tonight and hear from our city attorney, as well as any other questions and things for the commission, so we can really work to flesh out some of those issues as we go into the work week, but to also take a vote to defer this item until the first meeting of February.
I'll second the motion.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Case. And so we have a first and a second. All of those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, the ayes have it, and we will move now into discussion of this item. I saw the city attorney, Brian Corey, come up. I would love to start with you, Mr. Corey, if you're available, to just talk us a little bit through the process of how this ordinance came about and kind of the background work that you've done on it.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. What is before you tonight would typically have been a second reading of an ordinance, and this particular ordinance was drafted, I believe, in September of last year. It might have even been October, so it had the opportunity or potential to have a first and second reading without bridging over from one commission to the next. But I do think it's probably more prudent to defer tonight so that anyone that's has any questions or concerns and hasn't had the opportunity to become familiar with the ordinance can certainly pose those. And it's important to note, and what was discussed last year, is that this ordinance, because the nature of how it might be adopted and put into practical application, we actually built in a 6-month period, which would have begun, had it been approved last year, it would have begun January 1st, 2022. And there's a 6-month period there that the ordinance would not actually become effective until July 1st, 2022. What we were trying to do there is put a 6-month period in. The county did something very similar that allow us to work through some of the hiccups, get forms prepared, get a process prepared, seek out whether or not there might be a third party what am I trying to say, vendor that might help track and take in these short-term rentals. So there's not a time constraint, and there's no issues moving it to February. But to give a little background on this was something that has come up recently with Airbnb, VRBO, those types of for rent by owner situations. We have had them popping up in the city of Brunswick. There's obviously quite a few in the greater unincorporated portion of Glenn, over on the islands. So Glenn County started to look into this too, because what a short-term rental does, or short-term rental ordinance does, part of the purpose of it is to ensure that, they're essentially bound by our hotel, motel, accommodation, taxation ordinance. So if they're not being tracked on that level, those hotel, motel taxes that are used to fund the Visitors Bureau and that the city could use to, reinvest into the community are not being tracked and sometimes not being collected. So I think Commissioner Martin originally had looked at this and asked and inquired into, the possibility, and Commissioner Kaysen, of putting together a short-term rental ordinance. I used 3 different examples. I looked at obviously Glenn County's, I looked at the city of Atlanta's, and I looked at Savannah's, because we had done a full rewrite of our alcohol ordinance in 2018 to try to better bring it into sort of uniformity with the county, because we have so much overlap. If a business owner owns something in the county or owns something in the city, we're trying to make it, as easy as possible for those types of business owners to navigate the process of obtaining a license, and making sure they're doing the right thing in whichever jurisdiction that they're located within. The base of this ordinance is based on Glenn County's current short-term rental ordinance. So that's where the structure that you see comes from. And what it basically requires is if somebody is operating a short-term rental property and within the city limits of the city of Brunswick, it places regulations on them that they must come in, submit an application, and obtain a short-term rental accommodation excise tax certificate. So it's a long-winded name of basically a business license to operate that short-term rental property. It then goes on further to place regulations on that to ensure that the operation of those short-term rentals are in compliance with our city ordinances, state laws, state regulations, and allows the city to have some control in regulating these properties and how they're used, making sure that if you're zoned a single family home, that the rental that you offer for short-term rentals mirrors that zoning. Basically, you can't chop up homes into multiple units and have a single family home located in a single family residential neighborhood suddenly becoming a 4-unit Airbnb rental opportunity. So those are the types of things we looked at when we put this ordinance together. John Hunter with the city's planning codes department also assisted, and we went over this several times. The city manager has of course been involved in looking this over, and it was presented last year, and there were some comments, and I think I've made those revisions now. We specifically made citations to the city's noise ordinance to ensure that short-term rentals are regulated by that. Also, there's additional language in the newest version of this ordinance addressing ADA accessibility accommodations for disabled persons that are seeking to rent these properties. And so what it would have been tonight, it would have been before you to be approved, but I'm more than prepared to discuss more specifically any ins and outs of the ordinance that you might want, or generally tonight if there's any questions as to the ins and outs of the ordinance.
Have we satisfied any public hearing requirements for the adoption or approval of this ordinance at this point? Or is that would be the night that we would have a vote before us?
We would need to re-advertise.
Okay. And I can't remember, but Mayor Pro Tem Harris, it seemed like at the end of last year, you had 1 or 2 specific questions about this proposed ordinance. And I couldn't remember exactly what they were, or if they got answered, or where you were with that, or if I was incorrect in saying that.
Just kind of looking at the pros and cons of this. And I heard Ryan say that they considered Savannah, go by Savannah, using some of Savannah's information. But I have questions regarding the owner-occupied renter primary parcels versus the non-occupied parcels or multifamily parcels. How did we look at those, as well as Savannah makes a distinction between these parcels and absent landlord owner parcels, as well as the multifamily parcels, more than 4 apartment units. Did we look at that? Have we defined that? How did we move about? How did we move about that? Did we consider a cap on these potential parcels per applicable owner, or within several areas? How are we moving about in that perspective, as well as some other concerns that I have as well?
I'd have to go, I'd need to go look at Savannah's in terms of the specific classifications they might have in owner occupied versus absentee. Those specific terms are not defined in this ordinance, but we certainly could go back and take a look at that and add those in if necessary.
Okay, yeah, because the conversion of the long-term rentals into, and these are just some potential issues, conversion of the long-term rentals into the short-term
Okay,
can affect the housing availability that we have.
sure.
Could affect our housing stock. Increased tourism can change the character of the neighborhood. Have we looked at how the potential impact that it could cause changing the character of neighborhoods? Visitors don't always know and follow our local rules. So I think that we kind of addressed that before as to how we would handle that if we hadn't. I hope we're doing it now. Short-term rentals, renters may not care about keeping good neighborly relationships. That goes into how we'll handle, those people coming in. Increased occupancy can have negative trash-related side effects. Unfair competition from Airbnbs can cause conflicts with hotels and job losses, and additional strain on our local police. So just some of those concerns that I'd like to have addressed.
Okay,
So I
I've written those down.
guess.
Let me take a look at that, because I think, part of what I would like to make sure this does is I would hope that this ordinance would help address a lot of those things. I mean, I think that some people might be looking to convert their long terms into short terms already. And this would, if you're converting a long term into a short term rental, you probably aren't taking into consideration that you're going to have to pay hotel motel accommodation taxes. A long term rental would not be subject to, accommodation taxes in the same sense. So I do think that I hope that we could address the concerns that were just laid out in this ordinance. So I will take a look at that and specifically go to Savannah's to see how they've taken those things into consideration.
Yeah, because I know, and especially with our housing stock,
Right.
that's something that the land bank is working on. And so we're trying to build our housing stock and to have those long-term residents come into the city. We're not knocking short-term at all. Don't want to be in the way of progression. But we also want to have long-term residents that will be here to help build the city in a positive manner.
Yeah, and it's balancing personal property rights too. I know there was a lot of discussion. I was part of, as a realtor, the discussions at that level with the county's ordinance, and private property rights was a huge element that had to be addressed. And what you can or can't say somebody can do with their own property is very limited. So I think, Brian, to the degree that you can look at that, I mean, Savannah is certainly a much larger city. They have a lot of different types of properties than we do in some cases. And I guess you want to look at what's the overall purpose of an ordinance such as this. If it's to capture the revenue, great. If it's to make sure that there's other ordinances that are being violated by the short-term rental tenants that need to be addressed, I think this ordinance addresses that, but there may be other things that we need to consider.
Well, I think one of the important things is that we are trying to regulate the activity because it's already happening.
Oh, yeah.
And it's already being impactful. And if we don't have something in place, then we don't have any guidance and we can't control what's happening in these residents and residential areas. And we want to be able to, tell them that you can't be parking all over the yards and in the street. You can't have, multiple trash, trash containers and things, overstock or overpiled in the streets. So I think, more so than generating any revenue is, and the revenue will help with enforcement, but just being able to control the activity in our community and get a handle on it and also know where it is occurring in the community is one of the important aspects of putting this in place.
One of the big things that helps is it helps to control events and it gives you some information. Also, I think this is something that's been in front of the audit committee for a long, long time. And Felicia, probably haven't y'all had it at the finance committee? I mean, aren't you aware that they had talked about it in the audit committee?
Yeah, I'm aware that audit committee
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
Initiator
Yeah.
of it.
They
But,
were
I
the
mean,
ones that
finance-
really brought it to my attention. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm like Regina, it's all over. It is unbelievable how much this is happening
Mhm.
in our city. And it does, again, I mean, you could pop up right now with nothing in place and have a major event right in one of our neighborhoods right now. You know, and we have nothing to do with it. We can't stop it. It's just like some of the things that have happened here recently. So
Yeah, and that's why I'm sorry, Johnny, go ahead.
this is a good tool, and it's something that probably we should have had in place a long time ago. But it needs to be right. I agree with you there. We want it to be applicable to the city of Brunswick.
Yeah, we want to be able not to take people's property rights, and understand what Commissioner Martin was saying, but we also want to have a level of control over how this thing spreads throughout our community, and capping certain things I think would be applicable, because we don't want to be overtaken and have our city overtaken with this. We want to be able to still have a measure of community within the city of Brunswick, and we don't want to be so commercialized that we lose that sense and identity of community.
We want to keep our neighborhoods neighborhoods. Yeah.
That's
Commissioner,
very well said.
No, Commissioner Harris, I completely agree and understand what you're saying is making sure you keep your neighborhoods. I do have a quick question for City Attorney Corey. Going into what City Manager McDuffie was saying, currently right now, there is nothing that prohibits any homeowner from turning their property into a short-term rental. Is that correct?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay. And so we're not dealing with currently right now whether we can stop a person from turning that property into a short-term rental. We're really dealing with the fact that it's a market that's already out there that's unregulated.
That's right.
And
That's
so
correct.
as we try and put regulations in this market as well, there is also an amount of money that the community is missing out on because they are not properly being taxed as a short-term.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And if we were to correctly levy that fee, those hotel motel taxes, that in some ways that almost can in some ways disincentivize people from flipping their property into a short-term rental, because we are now ensuring that we are putting them in the correct regulated market, and they kind of don't get to play in this unregulated market where they can just take that money in.
Right. Right.
Okay.
I mean, you're still, you're always going to pay your own property taxes regardless. And then there's an additional, right. So it could could have a persuasive, connotation on whether they do that or not.
You know, with what the excise fee that we're assessing here, I don't think it's going to be much of a deterrent. And I know these folks are making some really, it's unbelievable the amount of money that they're making these Airbnb rentals. It is unreal. Julie, you probably aware of that. It's tremendous. But people are not wanting to stay in hotels and motels right now. So really, this is sort of a COVID thing too that's incentivizing the Airbnb rentals. Is it going to go back the other way to a hotel motel thing when COVID is under control, if it ever gets controlled? It certainly is driving Airbnb right now to heights that I don't know if it would have been around or not, but particularly down in the South End, it's a lot going on with this.
And Mayor Pro Tem Harris, if you don't mind, can I ask you just a quick question? Because I heard you mention something about a cap, and I'm thinking that that's also hello. I'm thinking that that's also a good idea. Are you saying in your cap that there is a cap on how many short-term rentals one property owner can own inside of the city? Is that what you're meaning when you say that?
I would say that we would need to consider that perspective, as well as an aerial type of cap. That there's only so many within a specific
Got
area.
you. Got you. Yes. Okay. Totally understand. I appreciate you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Well, I would ask a question going back to Commissioner Martin's concern or comment about private property and how much we can, tell someone how to use their property as long as they're within the, I guess, regulations of the zone.
City Manager McDuffie, can you hold on 1 second? Miss Mills.
Yeah.
Miss Mills.
I'm sorry.
Yep, you're off of mute, so we can hear you. Can you mute yourself, please?
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
But what I was saying was, those are some things, and I think we do need to look at Savannah's, but that would be hard. From the way I see it, even to cap in an area, because then you're allowing one person to do it, and then you're taking away that right from another person. So how do you regulate? To make that determination.
That's get into that private property rights.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I would look at it, that's just like if you we tell people about them setting up group homes. We don't allow every home in a community to become a group home. We have regulations that's in place for that. So, I don't see it being far off from, things that are already in place.
Yeah, and I'll do some research to look into that to ensure that there's certainly been a balancing act somewhere where they've taken those two types of the property rights. There's always that taken into consideration when you're talking about zoning of the balancing act of private property rights versus the community in at large. So it'll be something I'll definitely take a look at.
And I'll just add this, going into what City Manager McDuffie just stated, the private property rights is something we do want to be very careful about, because I know the city of Savannah, if they don't still have intact, used to have intact a medallion program kind of for their historic downtown corridor. And I know they went through a lot of legal wrangling as to figure out how to ensure that didn't hurt property owners who could have the medallion. And I think the medallion transferred actually with the property. So it created an inflated value on that property if it had the medallion versus those that didn't. So we do want to be careful in not creating that unbalanced market. But I do understand Mayor Pro Tem Harris trying to find a way to truly balance it with the community. So I totally understand, and I'm happy for the work that we're going to put in to make sure that we get it.
definitely, and careful of gentrification.
I want to leave it open for any additional questions or comments before we move on.
I would just ask, Brian, if you make any changes to the ordinance, if they could be redlined or somehow we can discern what's been changed from one commission meeting to the next.
Of course. And
Thank
it might be best to treat this as if we have just started over. I mean, it might even be best to treat it as getting it, a copy of it on the first agenda for February, where if there's any questions or comments, we would then advertise in between for public comment and have a second reading, which would make it available for approval on the second meeting of February. That way we would know the process and know when to advertise. If we think we're going to be able to move, get work on it and have it available for approval then.
Sounds good.
Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none. Do we have any closing statements? I see we are at the end of the agenda, but before I closed out, I wanted to leave it open to anyone from the commission. Hearing nothing, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Do we need to go into executive session for any reason?
No, not tonight.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Thank you for that first and second. All show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those nay. Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.